Is it hard for you to talk about your sexual wants, needs, and desires? Well, you're not alone. It's hard for everybody, and that's no pun intended. Are you hard right now and can't talk about it? Well, if so, this podcast is for you. Hi, I'm Toby. I'm from the band Emery. I've also led a bunch of men's groups with the True Man Experience, and I'm working on this podcast with Dr. Stormy, who is an amazing sex coach who has helped so many people, and that's what we're here to do. We were here to open up the conversation. You need to be able to talk about your sexual desires, your wants, and yes, even your needs, and where you can take your sex life with your partner. So sit back, relax. We're taking listener questions. We're going to have a great episode. Join us because this is the sex education you always wish you would have gotten. All right, we're back with another episode. Stormy, you doing good?
I'm doing so well. Happy Friday. Well, we're recording on Friday, so happy Friday.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because the pool is open in our town now, and we have like it's really. Well, I never had this growing up in the South, but I guess I don't know if this is a Midwest thing or not. But because you were Michigan, is that right?
Michigan girl,
yeah. It's like everybody it seems like every town has these big like pool areas like with water slides and stuff. It's funny, like maybe because I grew up near the ocean or something like that, but we didn't have really anything like that. And here it's like just a neighborhood pool that's massive, with slides and the lazy river and all that stuff. And so
totally there's one here too.
Yeah, I've been frustrated with myself because I've been trying to work out and eat healthy, but the last few weeks haven't been so good. So I'm like, I got to go to the pool. I'm getting a little nervous, but yeah, I'll get there.
It's good motivation. Get your pool body,
You're right. Yeah, it really is good motivation. So, okay. So I'm excited about today's episode because I don't totally even know. I don't think I've ever maybe experienced this. Maybe I don't know yet. So today's episode is what is sacred sex and how to have it. So I definitely like the how to have the sex part. I'm really in there. The sacred sex, I'm like, what? Oh, here we go. What are we about to learn? So I'm very excited to learn what we're talking about today. And I think I have a kind of a good stump Stormy even on this because I was doing a little research and stuff. But we'll see. We'll find out that later. And we'll got some really good listener questions later. But I think we should just get right into it. What is sacred sex and how do we have it? Where do you want to start, Stormy?
Well, I think it's really important to start with, with how we already view sex as a culture. I mean, right, these are some broad strokes assumptions. This isn't everyone. But in general, I mean, the idea is that sexual energy and sexual pleasure has the power to change, to heal, and to transform. That's sort of the 30,000 foot view of what approaching sex with the sacredness is about. And, most people, again, broad strokes, but see sex as a way of maybe connecting with their partner or feeling connected or getting laid or a dopamine hit or, getting your rocks off or whatever, right, or some degree of all of those. But not a lot of people think of sex as sacred. And it's one of my very favorite things to practice myself. It's one of my very favorite things to teach to the clients and that I coach. And it's really about making sex life changing, life altering, and looking at sex as a tool for your own personal growth and development, including your spiritual development.
Yeah.
And, we're very as a culture, we're very church and sex, sort of as separate, and religion and sex as separate. Right. And I think I can really relate to that. I grew up Catholic, and I'm sure you can relate to that too, Toby. Mm-hmm. Would that be true?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was separated. It's funny that you say that. I wouldn't even have maybe necessarily put it that way, but that you're spot on. Sex was, and the idea of sex being spiritual was only that a man and a woman united in marriage. And that was about as far as they went spiritually. It was never like the sex could take you potentially together somewhere. So that might even been considered dangerous or wrong,
Yeah, totally. Right. And if you look at so many other cultures, sex and spirituality are very much linked. Right. Even in ancient temples, they literally had temples that were the entrance is shaped like the woman's vagina, like the entrance to the woman's vagina. It's and then we got so far from that. And so not getting into, I don't want to get into the rhetoric of that or the wrong and right of that, but I really want my desire for our podcast today is really to educate on what is sacred sex and how do you bring that into your partnership? Because it's an incredible way, not only to grow yourself to be closer to your higher power. And so, by the way, today, if I say God, that's because that's for me, my higher power. But if for the listeners and watchers out there, it's really about connecting to outside of yourself, to your higher power, to something much bigger than you.
Yeah.
So you might hear me say God today because that's what it is for me. But it's really that way beyond the act of just penetrative sex, right? It's so far. I mean, I always say that there's no wrong or right, there's no good or bad, but once you've experienced sacred sex, let's just call it regular sex, is still amazing. There's a time and a place for that, but it's literally apples and oranges. It's almost like orthogonal scales, really. So that's why I get so excited about teaching this and about helping people understand that this is, first of all, that it's even possible. What is it? We have to know that it's even possible. And then how to. I've got, I think, let me just check. I think it's like 10 tips. Yep. 10 tips to make sex sacred. So those are coming. So
I really do. And the reason why to me this is important is just because I think you're so right. Like sex oftentimes just feels like an act, or it's just something that you go do, just like you got to get groceries, you got to, go to your work job, you got to get sex done. And I think that we miss out sometimes on how more expansive it is and how beautiful it is, and how like we can do things for each other that, you're right, isn't just penetrative. You know what I mean? Like, right. Or it doesn't always have to be, I got this, you get this, or you know what I mean? Or it's like only right. shooting for an orgasm or something like that. So I think this is really, really awesome way of looking at sex.
Yeah, and we are so orgasm focused, right? And don't get me wrong, orgasms are amazing. We're going to do an episode coming soon on how to have better orgasms. So that's how awesome they are. So this isn't about that. Again, it's almost, think of it as orthogonal, as like a whole new world that's open, that can be open to you and your partner. And also, just a little caveat, we're going to talk a lot today about partnered sex, but you can practice sacred sex and making sex sacred even if you're single or doing solo play. So, but I think it's really like, if you look at, like, let's say Christian specific, I think it's so interesting because, like, love and spirit, right? And I am certainly no biblical scholar, but I've read the Bible a few times, but love and spirit are often seen together, right? Love and spirit are often linked, right? But so my question is, how does that not include erotic love? Like, where does it say, and how does it say, like, that has to be separate, right? Erotic love is, okay, love and spirit are very linked, except for erotic love. It's like, no, I would actually posit absolutely including erotic love, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's like I said, sexuality is part of many traditions, spiritual traditions around the world. But and I found a quote by Reverend Tricia Elliott, and I love this quote. So this is about kind of bringing sacred sexuality into the Christian space. Is, if our ability to love makes us most like God, then why wouldn't making love put us in a holy state? And I was like, wow, when I read that, I was like, that is so good. So if our ability to love makes us most like God, then why would making love put us in a holy state?
Yeah.
So I love that. And one of the things when I think about this, and I had to wrestle with it myself because I am a Christian and I grew up Catholic, like, is that God gave us sex. Like, I always have this image of, like, God could have made it that we, procreate by, like, eating a piece of fruit or drinking a weird tea or something like that. But he gave us sex. So that it's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be an act of devotion, right, to your partner. It's meant to be a way to connect more deeply to yourself, to your partner, and to God, and to your higher power. So, I was even like thinking back to I was like, okay, let's go all the way back to Genesis, right? It says that, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast his wife, and they shall become one flesh. He doesn't say two fleshes who occasionally get together and have sex. It's one flesh, right?
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about like by Song of Songs, like that's the steamiest book in the Bible, right? That is like the metaphor of lovers for your relationship to God. So, I think it's really about acknowledging that our life force energy and our sexual energy come from the same source. I mean, that's really what sacred sexuality is in a 30,000-foot view.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I really do think that we miss out on so much lovemaking because it feels like culture and society has pushed us to go penis, vagina. You know what I mean? But there's so much more to lovemaking that can open up a whole new world to you. So this is great.
Often, yeah, right. Well said. And often, many of us grew up in a family of origin where it wasn't talked about. It was sort of like even self-pleasure was like, oh, quick, hide it,
Oh, I
hide it
know.
behind closed doors and like clean it all up, right? And like, maybe do in the shower or whatever. But
Right.
there has been, and it's shifting, right? Our mission, one of our missions with this podcast, with Sex 101 podcast, is about bringing sex education, sex positivity, right? To you all, to the world,
Yeah.
hopefully, right? And but that we have a lot of undoing to do. And that's
Yeah.
not good or bad. It's not like I'm not into like family of origin, like let's blame our parents for all of our issues, like at all. That's not my approach to how I work with family of origin stuff. But we did grow up in families of origin. Many of us grew up in religion.
Hmm.
And so that impacts us, and it absolutely impacts how we relate to sex and sexuality. There's
Totally.
no question about it.
Yeah.
So, I found a Christian study today. It was interesting. They studied, I think it was 14 couples, and this is our hetero couples. But what they found was when they practice sacred sexuality, they had a sense of wonder, bonding, euphoria, arousal. They felt blessing and transcendence. They felt the presence of God during sex, and that it really was to the point of ecstasy. And I thought that was really cool. This was out of Vancouver,
Yeah.
but really looking at that. That's reported in the Christian space. So what I would suggest, what I want to invite all of our listeners to is like, what if sex can open up a whole world of intimacy and connection with your partner far more than you have experienced or you could imagine via sacred sex? And
Yeah.
that is possible. Um, and it's really this, that we can change, heal, and transform through the energy of sex. I mean, there's no more potent energy on the planet. It has the potential to create life. That's how powerful it is.
Yeah.
It was given by God. It is meant to be cultivated and curated and enjoyed. Obviously, we're talking about consensually,
Right.
but it's really this. We are so myopic in how we view sex, and like you said earlier, Toby, it's like penis inside vagina. It's like,
Yeah.
what? No, there is so much more than that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and experiencing your own sexuality oftentimes is a lot of shame. I can remember,
Mm-hmm.
I can remember being in the bathroom, my mom going, "You've been in there a while." Like she thought I didn't realize at the time because I wasn't doing anything. I was actually just going to the bathroom. But I can remember there's several times where I was like, "Oh,"
Mm-hmm.
and it was like if I were to masturbate or if I were to really have questions about sex, that was kind of shot down. Save that for later, or we'll maybe talk about it, and definitely any kind of self pleasure was
Mm-hmm.
really, there's a lot of shame that goes there, and I think that's one of the things that interferes with probably even sacred sex, but sex in general. Just you have all these preconceived notions about yourself, your sexuality, your partner's
Mm-hmm.
sexuality, and then it's hard to connect on that spiritual level because you're so focused here on the physical. You know what I mean? Instead of
Right,
allowing
right.
yourself to be opened up, because it's scary to open up. It's scary to be like
Totally.
to try to be free in sex. Because you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about what's my belly look like right now, or am I doing good, or
Right.
is my
Mm-hmm.
partner enjoying it? You can get in your head a lot, and to be so free
Absolutely.
to be so free actually sounds and feels freeing. So
Yeah, no, that's so well said, right? So whenever we're in performance, it's going to take us out of our pleasure. It's going to take us out of
yeah,
present moment. And I mean, I love that with that because some of the like key ingredients to practicing sacred sex is mindfulness,
yeah,
intention, right? Slowing it down, and really allowing a spiritual connection, right? So
yeah,
seeing the divine in yourself, right? Including your belly, like you just mentioned,
yeah.
right? Which is not easy to do,
Right.
and being willing to see the divine in your partner. Like, how amazing is that? I mean, I have full
Yeah,
body goosebumps as I'm saying that. Like, it's really, so for me, this practice has been hands down one of the most life-changing practices in my own life. And I discovered this about 15 years ago. And you know how you don't know what you don't know until you do? Like, I had always felt like there was something missing in sex for me in my own sexual experiences, but I didn't know what it was until I
yeah,
found it. And I was like, and this is what has been missing, So it
yeah.
won't be like that for all of you, but for me, this has been absolutely life, love, and sex changing.
That's awesome. All right, you want to get to some tips?
Yeah. So, well, let's just do the little, me and my definition. So,
No.
what is
Oh yeah,
sacred?
yeah,
So, I love that. So, the dictionary defines it as made or declared holy, dedicated, or devoted exclusively to a use, purpose, or person worthy of reverence or respect. Right. So, the word itself is from the Latin word sacra, which think about our sacrum. it comes from the same word, like literally the triangular bone at the base of our spine, which in many traditions is where they believe that we house our sexual energy. So like that's not a coincidence, like right, there's already a sacredness around that space.
Yeah.
And so it's something like, to me, sacred. I worked with a meditation teacher, Deborah Eden Toll, who's amazing. And she said, wherever we put our attention is sacred, right? So wherever we put our attention is sacred. And I love that, right?
Mm.
Sacred doesn't just lie in a church or at an altar. Sacred lies in nature and feeling connected to your higher power, whether it's through song or for me, it's in the mountains. I feel it's absolutely sacred. So why would we say that sacredness can't and shouldn't and isn't it meant to be a part in our bedroom, right? Like why is
Yeah.
it separate from that? So I love that about where we put our attention. So basically what makes something sacred is our relationship to it. So how are you relating to your sex life currently? And just get curious about that for yourself. So that's a little bit about the definition. But yeah, let's get into 10 tips to make sex sacred.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. So the first one, of course, it's always going to start with you, right? With
Yep.
each of us individually, because we are an individual, beautiful, sovereign being who is choosing to have sex with a partner. Okay.
Yep.
So the first tip is connect to your own spirituality, right? And that's actually like, even that is a huge one, right? Because what does that mean? Are you religious? Are you spiritual? Who do you connect with? Is it God? Is it truth? Is it universal consciousness? Whatever it is, but connecting to your own spirituality, connecting, get curious, investigate, journal, take classes, read books, find out, like get curious about your own spirituality.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, for me, it's God. And my son, as he was wrestling with his own faith, I was like, wrestle with it, like wrestle with it, get curious about it, ask questions, read
Right.
books, listen to podcasts. So really, the first one is connecting to your own spirituality, because again, we're not looking to connect to our spirituality through our partner, because that will
Right.
be not ever good. So that's the first tip. The second tip is to see sex as a gift from your higher power. Right. Like for me,
Yeah.
like I said, God could have had us have sex anyway and gave it, could have had us procreate anyway and gave us sex. So
Yeah.
see sexing as a gift from your higher power, not separate from, but as a gift from. So
Yeah.
that's huge, huge mindset shift. And then the third is don't leave
Can
your
I say
body.
something? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
please.
Well, I was just gonna say that is really something to remember, because I find myself not thinking that way. Uh, a gift is something that you receive, and that
Mm,
someone's thinking about you, and that it is for you, but also it's a connection to that other person or something like that. So I think that you're right. Like I think once again, sometimes sex, at least for me, sometimes I just think, I go, oh, this is something that is going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to be great. But I don't know if I put it in that framework of a gift, that, oh man, this is like a blessing in a way,
mm,
man. This is something
mm,
to be enjoyed that is bigger than just me. And so I think that is
mm,
something to really kind of sit with a little bit, that this is
mhm.
a gift that you both are giving each other, that can be really beautiful. And if you think of it that way, then it will be more fun. It's fun to get gifts.
Totally. Oh, I love that. Right.
Yeah.
And it is a gift. Like it is such a blessing. It's such a privilege. It's such an honor. It's such an incredible, it really is a gift,
Yeah.
right?
It's like the best gift.
You know, it's a gift at all the
Yeah.
levels,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So no, that's awesome. Okay. So the third tip is don't leave. You mentioned this earlier, Toby, about like being in performance or worrying about the other person or worrying about what your belly looks like, but don't. So the way I phrase this is don't leave yourself or your body. Okay,
Mm.
so meaning stay with yourself, like stay in your body, right? And this isn't about being selfish, although it is about like really being in your own body, your own pleasure, because then you can be able to read and offer, be the giver to your partner. So really staying with yourself and your body, right? Connecting more deeply. And that might mean some body love work to be like, okay, here I am, my belly and all, right? And that is
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah.
But when we're in performance or when we are in our head, we aren't in our body, and pleasure really lies in the body. That deep connection lies in the body. So,
Mm. Yeah. That's great.
so, so that's the third tip. The fourth tip is this one I love, to see your partner as divine, right? And what does that mean? I think that means different things, but to me, that means seeing your partner for all their like amazing things and all the flaws and all the things that like drive you crazy about them, and like surrendering judgment. And how beautiful, like for me, how godly is that, right? To surrender judgment and see your partner as God sees your partner. See
Yeah.
your partner as your higher power sees your partner. Like it's a really an invitation to see yourself and your partner as divine.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's, just even that mindset shift, right? Like the next tip, the fifth tip is exercise your devotion and your adoration muscle, right? So it is so powerful and so transformative and really a shift of mindset to think of making love to your partner as devotion and adoration. Right? Often, and especially in long-term committed relationships, sex becomes mundane, sex becomes habitual, sex becomes, like you said, something just to check the box, like, hey, we had our sex this one time this week, right? If your average, most couples 1.3 times per week, right?
Yeah.
But really, when was the last time you approached your partner with a spirit of adoration and a spirit of devotion? Right. That is a different energy than like, all right, babe, let's just do this. Let's get this
Yeah.
done. Right.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, and that once again, I think that plays into that gift idea or the divinity you were just talking about. Like when you can see somebody as special, unique, and with love, not just making love, but see them in love. Um, it just opens up a whole another door that takes away only from the physicality. Then I think it's not just about the physical. Then it's
Right.
about two people connecting in a way that is really special and unique at this exact moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Right. And if you are practicing, hopefully, conscious monogamy, I mean, meaning if you're practicing monogamy, hopefully it's conscious monogamy. But let's say you are practicing monogamy, then this is the one person on the whole world that you choose to have sex with and that chooses to have sex with you. Like
Yeah.
that is so special, so sacred. Why wouldn't we be in adoration and devotion? And by the way, this is a practice. Like I've been practicing this for almost 15 years now. And it's not like I'm always in adoration and devotion with my partner. That would be amazing if that were the
Yeah.
case.
Right.
Well, that is not the case. But then we literally have times where we will practice sacred sexuality, and it is a practice, right?
Yeah.
There's tons of books and tools, right? I offer, and that's actually what I wanted to share with our listeners. Like, I have a Sacred Sex 101 guide because I love teaching this. It has some concrete practices for you. So you can email me, Stormy at lovedeeplab.com, and just put the Sacred Sex 101 guide in the subject, and I will send that to you, right? So ways besides these 10 tips, concrete practices to keep this going and to look at it like a practice. Right? It is something that you're in practice of. It's not like something you just arrive at being, you know, have having sacred sex. It's a practice to have sacred sex.
Yeah. 100%. Because it's the same as everything else. If you don't practice, you don't get better. And in fact, you get worse. Like no one ever gets
Yeah.
better at running marathons by not doing it that often, like, and like you said, it's not always going to be easy. You're not always going to feel that way, that connected with your partner. Arguments happen, distance happens sometimes,
Absolutely.
like you're at work or somebody's got to travel, whatever it might be. There's all kinds of things that come up in your life. So it is important to connect this way spiritually, because then it will lead to even, healthier, better, deeper relational sex.
Totally, right? And like there's a time for makeup sex, there's a time for quickie sex, there's a time for, we've had episodes on how to have a little bit of rougher sex if that's something you're interested in, right? There's all these different kinds of sex. This is one really powerful, life-changing kind of sex that I really was excited to share with our listeners and to
Yeah,
teach on with you. So
this is awesome.
uh, okay, so the sixth tip is to engage all your senses, because our senses, and this is one of my area of expertise in my occupational therapy world, is our eight senses, but our senses literally wrap our brains, right? So when we engage all of our senses, meaning like take the time to create the space, whether it's music or candlelight or a nice blanket or maybe a piece of lingerie that you're wearing, that not that you have to feel sexy and that you feel beautiful in, that your part, maybe it's
Yeah.
about, it's also about like taking the time to take a shower, not because you're worried about smelling, but you want to feel clean and smell beautiful, smell sexy, right? It's really taking the time to really engage all your senses and create the space. That is another really powerful tip. And often we don't, right? We get into bed and we're like,
Hmm.
okay, let's just do this, or in the morning with morning breath, which is fine. But
Right.
like, it's different than creating an intentional space and really saturating your senses. That helps you drop into your body and will help you have more pleasure.
Yeah, you're right. I've been learning a lot. Unfortunately, I think have a ton. I have a ton of ADHD, and
Yeah.
I've always kind of thought I've had it, but just more. I've been doing a lot of reading and following this doctor that really just is opening my eyes. But he's talking about, just like even with ADHD, setting a space and having like a time to where you go to do something, whether that be journal or read or, you know, get work done or whatever it might be, you have to kind of set those things up. And I think that even plays into what we're talking about now. If you go, you know what, I think some people feel like it's not sexy if you don't have a place, or it's not sexy if you set a time or you set a place or you do something like that. But, and I know we're not saying that. We're not saying that that's the only time or the only place you would have sex, but it is really nice to know there's this spot that, like you said, that quote that you said, or the teacher you worked with that said, whatever you focus your attention on is sacred. Well, if you focus your attention on a spot in your home or whatever it might be, that spot can already set up sacredness. And you have that already to where you're not going, where are we going to do it now? What, you know, because then life gets in the way. The kids are down the hall and you're like, wait, but you know, so if you can focus your attention on some things, it will help make those things sacred already for you. Kind of like my ADHD brain.
And that's well said, right? Like I'm a big fan of scheduling sex. Like as a sex and intimacy coach, I have my clients do that a lot. And sometimes they're like, just like you mentioned, it's like, oh, that's not that sexy, but it actually is. You're prioritizing, you're putting intention and attention. You've set aside this time, right? So like I mentioned with my partner, we will literally say like, hey, let's do a practice. And we're talking about a sacred sex practice. And we will set aside a time in advance to do a practice, right? That's not going to necessarily work for everyone. That's how we do it. But there is something, Toby, like what you said, to setting aside the time and the space, right? It's also that prioritizing. You're putting your attention there already, which is huge.
Right. Yeah, so that's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. So the 7th tip is to breathe together, right? Our breath is an amazing way to sync up our nervous systems, to get more into parasympathetic nervous system where we're more able to deeply connect to our partner. So breathing together, right? And there's usually what we're talking about with sacred sex is slowing down and breathing more deeply, because as we tend to build pleasure, we tend to get our breath gets more shallow, right? And even with orgasm, there's a different kind of breath, but the really breathing together. And so two things I like is you can breathe what we call synchronous breathing. So you can breathe in together and out together.
Yeah.
Okay. And you follow each other, breathing in nice and slow and deep together, breathing out nice and slow and deep together.
Yeah.
And there's also reciprocal breathing, which is if one of the partners breathes out as the other partner breathes in, and then that partner breathes in as the other partner breathes out. So you're breathing in reciprocity with each other. Okay. So play around with that. And for me, those feel very different. And so play around with it. What feels like it really builds that connection, that sexual energy, that erotic energy. So breathing together is a big tip.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. And then the 8th one is sort of overarching, slow down. We tend to speed up as pleasure increases.
Yeah.
Right? That's the pattern. Really slowing down, savoring, luxuriating, being in total awe and wonder of this experience with your partner. And you can only do that when you slow down. If you're just rushing right through to get to the pinnacle of orgasm, you're missing a lot of the amazing parts of the journey.
Yeah.
So that's slowing down. And then the 9th tip is when and if you orgasm. Okay, the focus is not on orgasm. So when and if you orgasm, to really feel, give yourself full permission to feel the orgasm. So we call that evolution, right? So outward, feeling the orgasm, but then also involution, meaning bringing that energy in. So one of the things that can be really amazing is as you're orgasming, literally breathing in bliss, let's say, or peace or love, into your heart space. You can do this if you have a synchronous orgasm or when either of you orgasm, but really feeling the orgasm fully and then breathing in bliss or peace or love or God or whatever you want to do into your heart as after the orgasm is a really powerful tool too.
Love it. Tip 10.
And then the last tip 10, the last tip, 10th tip, which you've heard on many podcasts from me, is aftercare, right? So if you're going to practice something new, cuddle, laugh, share, talk about what was that like for you? What was amazing? What felt hard? What was it like? What do you want to try next time to do differently, right? This is the idea of the practice. So there's a dialogue, a connection, a sharing, a vulnerability and intimacy building that's important in the aftercare. And that's why the 10th tip is aftercare.
Awesome. These are great. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it seems not as is sexual to think about each of these tips in the moment, but each of these set you up to feel so connected with your partner. I mean, like, and to feel confident in yourself and to maybe really experience something you haven't experienced before. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try this. It's a little scary though. Am I gonna, you know what I mean? Like, I want to. Like, it sounds like, you know, you said you've been practicing this for a while. I do, but it is a little intimidating because sometimes you just think, well, it's just sex or something. But I think what we're really tapping into here is that sex can be more, and I think that's what everybody kind of wants. You do want your sex to be more and to be beautiful and to be connected and for it to be spiritual and transcendent in a way is just it really would take your lovemaking to the next level, which is really fascinating and fun.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's a little scary, right? It's like anything new, you know, puts our nervous system into kind of like, oh boy, is this going to be safe? Am I going to be safe? Is this going to be okay? So like that's to be expected. So I worked with a retreat teacher who called it fun, comfortable, right? So that kind of space of like, it's fun and it's a bit uncomfortable. So when it feels fun, comfortable, that's the perfect place to be. That means you're growing, you're trying something new, you're sharing something new with your partner. And it's a really, really beautiful space.
All right, this is great. You ready for your Stump Stormy?
I sure am.
It's time to Stump Stormy.
I kind of want to change it up though. Now that you got me, well, like you said, you and your partner or partners in the past have set aside some time to do a sacred sex to like just what, like a meditation or what? Like I wonder, like if you aren't going straight to just sex, is that like looking into each other's eyes? Is there something like a couple at home listening right now could just try that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, penetrative sex? Is there like, what would that be if you want to start somewhere simple?
Question. Yeah. So these 10 tips that we give are kind of like overarching. They're like sort of the framework, but like one concrete. So a couple of things, you definitely email me for that guide because there's singles and couples practices in the Sacred Sex 101 guide. It's a free ebook. So just shoot me an email and I'll send you that. But one of the practices in that guide is one of my favorite practices, which like you just totally hit it on the head, Toby, is eye gazing. That's right. So non-sexual, right? Very, very sensual, very erotic, very tender, very beautiful. Can also be done with a perfect stranger and not be sexual at all.
Right.
Is eye gazing. So simply like one practice, you would set up a timer for, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes is what I recommend for beginners. And you simply you agree to no words. So no verbal words, no communication verbally. And you simply gaze, but softly, not like a piercing stare, but softly into your beloved's eyes. Okay. And it will feel uncomfortable. It will feel awkward. You might feel like you want to look away or laugh. You might feel emotion. All of that is welcome. All of that is beautiful. The practice is about seeing and being seen by your partner. It's very intimate. It's super sexy. It's really powerful. And you literally set a timer for 2 or 3 minutes and you just simply look into your partner's eyes, no words. Okay. And then what I recommend when the timer goes off is then you can agree that you're going to share what that was like if you want to, right? But you have full sovereignty to say, you know, wow, that was really powerful. I don't really feel like sharing on that. Yeah. And that's a great way, so sometimes sacred sex practices include sex and sometimes they don't, right? So it's because the goal isn't about penetration. The goal is about connection and seeing the divine yourself, the divine your partner, seeing God in your sexual practice or your higher power in your sexual practice. That's the goal. That's the practice. Penetrative sex may or may not be a part of that.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, awesome. Sorry, I changed up the Stump Stormy, but I just wanted to hear a little bit some a little concrete today too, on top of the tips that because it is when it starts to get into the practice of it. I want it's nice for our listeners to know just a small step to start with, and then definitely get the your Stormy's guide emailer immediately. Okay, let's get to listener questions.
Amazing.
Have a question? We've got answers. Here's this week's listener questions.
Okay, our first listener comes in and says, how do I tell my wife I would like her to try butt play on me? Like Toby, we both grew up in conservative Christian homes. I thought he was going to say like Toby with butt play, but he didn't, thank God. He said, like Toby, we both grew up in conservative Christian homes. And so this isn't something that we have ever discussed.
I love this question. So a couple things, right? So this is this gentleman being curious about his words, butt play for himself, right? So butt play on the man in this question. So my first thought would be exploring it on your own is a really great place to start. So whether that's in self-pleasure or, in the shower or whatever, just simply like on the outside, we definitely recommend lube or soap or something, something slippery, and soap can be dry. So I recommend lube, but, playing around with that area with just your finger, like, because there's so many nerve endings there. So the reason I say to explore on your own is a great start is you begin to feel more comfortable with that part of your body.
Yeah.
When we're more comfortable and more familiar with the pleasure we have in a part of our body, it's easier for us to communicate that to a partner. Okay. But if that feels like a no and you're only wanting partnered exploration, that's okay too. So then what I would say is bring it up not in the moment. Okay. Now when you're having sexy time and you're wanting to explore this, bring it up not in the moment. So maybe in a moment when you're non-sexually feeling really connected with your partner, with your wife, and then sharing with her why you're excited about it. That like, hey, like I grazed across it the other day and it felt really good. And it made me be like, wow, it would be so hot to have her involved or whatever it is for you. That's true. But sharing why you're excited about it. And then asking her how she feels about it. Maybe she's excited about it. Maybe she's nervous about it. Maybe it feels scary or gross to her. Like, you don't know, you can never make an assumption. So you're asking her. So always starting with you, sharing why you're excited about it, and then asking her how she feels about it. So that would be like the next step. And then if fear comes up, if she's like, I'm afraid, or I've never done that, or I don't want it to be on me, it's like, well, all you're asking for is for play on you. So that would be, want to be clear about that. But lean into the fears, get curious about them. Like maybe it's about prep. Maybe she feels like it's not cleanly. It's like, well, that's easy. You can very much groom and hygiene before butt play. So we also have a whole episode that we did on anal play. So definitely check that out. And then if you're going to go ahead with it with partnered play, decide how to start and to go slow. Those would be my other tips. Like how are you going to start? Is it finger? Is it a toy? Is it vibration? Lots and lots and lots of lube, and go slow. Okay. And that's what we talk about in that episode on anal play, is that the reason why often people report pain is they go way too fast and they go without enough turn on. So starting really slow, giving time for turn on, and starting that way.
Yeah. 100%. Lots of lube and start small and slow. For sure. For sure.
Exactly.
All right. I'm in a next question. I'm in a sexless marriage. We've been together for 10 years and love each other, but I do feel frustrated with the lack of flirting and sex that we have. I have tried to bring this up to my wife, but it seems to always end in an argument about work, kids, and our busy lives. I often wonder if we should separate and get divorced, but I want to stay with her. And this one kind of hits home for me a little bit, just because I work with so many men, and I've heard this so many times, and it's really tough because men want to be wanted, and they even need to be wanted. I kind of even want to use that strong language there. And oftentimes I think men are seen as the aggressor, say like they are initiating sex, that they're the tougher of the two in the couple, like the man, he's a man, he's masculine, he initiates sex, he does all these things. And lots of times I'm hearing from men, man, I just wish my wife or my partner would flirt with me even, I like a little bit of foreplay, it seems like men are always bad at foreplay, but oftentimes it's because they don't even know where to start, because they don't even feel that they're attractive right now to their partner or something like that. So this one hits a little hard, I think.
Yeah, totally. Well said, right? And also, sexless or low sex marriages is so common. It's one of the things that I feel very passionate about and write about and teach about, because I've been in one. I was in a low sex marriage for over a decade. And it's so common, Toby, like you just said. It's like, they say 20% of marriages are low sex or no sex. And that is so heartbreaking to me, because it doesn't have to be that way. But so I want to, acknowledge the tenderness in this question too. I felt the same thing. And your first question about actually the end of your question about separating or getting divorced is I certainly can't answer whether you should stay or she should go. It's a personal choice, but it is a choice, and it's one that's very tender and has so many layers to the onion. But you do have choice, and so does your partner. And sometimes it can be important to remember that, so that staying or going is really up to you. And obviously, I always recommend doing the work before you make a choice to stay or go. Doing the work on yourself, doing the work relationally. You can't make a partner come along with you for the work, but you can certainly do your own work. And that's what I like to stay focused on. So, but really to give you some tangibles, is you mentioned it hasn't gone well when you've tried to bring it up, is definitely, again, the timing. So do not bring it up in the bedroom. Do not bring it up when you're feeling rejected or when you've been turned down again, right? Because you're in reaction and she's in defensiveness, or whatever the story might be, the pattern might be. But bring it up when you are feeling connected, non-sexually, and then keeping the focus on what you miss about your sex life and how not having it impacts you. So keeping the focus on you. It is so common and so understandable that especially when we're hurt, we tend to be like, well, you don't do this and you do this and you hurt me. And that might be your experience, but when you use I language, it will go a lot better. So I miss our sex life. I miss feeling connected to you in this way. And when we don't, it makes me feel this way. That is very different to receive. Okay.
Yeah, that's huge.
And then, it's huge, right? And not easy, right? It's a practice, right? And then being curious, really curious about her and her response, which is also not easy to do when you're hurt and pissed off and feeling rejected and sexually frustrated and all the things that you might be, but really being curious about her and her response, right? Maybe she's like, oh my gosh, the kids right now, I just feel like there's somebody always needs something from me, and this feels like one more need, right? Well, now you guys have this really beautiful place to connect, rather than you making assumptions about why she's not wanting to have sex and her making assumptions about why you are wanting to have sex, right? So that's being curious. And then the other thing is to, I always recommend when someone, and by the way, this happens for women too, or women are the ones wanting more sex. That was the case for me. It's also statistically more frequently than we would think the case, is that taking back some reclamation of your own pleasure. So through self-pleasure, through making love to yourself, right? AKA masturbation, but I really like to teach it as making love to yourself. Taking back some of the pleasure, your own responsibility for your own pleasure, your own orgasm will take some of the pressure off of the relationship. And that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, for sure. I think the big thing that you're saying there that really does stick out is you cannot react in the moment when your feelings are so high or you're emotional or you're hurt, because you will say things that maybe just even that you don't want to say in the way that you're saying them. So take your time. Don't do it in the bedroom. You're right. And then that I language is really huge. It just really is. It's so easy to go, you did, and it's just so easy to go there because you're hurting and you're trying to defend yourself, and you want them to love you how you even want to be loved. I think we sometimes we do forget, like, it is so, you do want people to love you the way you want to be loved, and you have to let people know how you want to be loved, but in the right way, in the right format, at the right time, so they're able to receive it. If you catch somebody when they're not able to receive it, then they just won't, and it's going to put more distance between you.
Yep, absolutely. Well said.
For sure. All right. So feel free to email us with any of your listener questions. We sure would appreciate it. And also to get your free Sacred 101 guide from Stormy, you can email Stormy once again at stormy@lovedeeplab.com. Everything there, she does a lot. So ask her anything and she'll send it back to you. Also, you can get 10% off at marriagesupply.com with code SEX101. And if you want to email me questions, you can just do it at toby@marriagesupply.com. Follow Dr. Stormy on Instagram at DocStormy1, that's the number 1, or TikTok at Touchy Subjects, 3 S's at the end. And Marriage Supply is on Instagram as well as the.marriage.supply. And remember, knowledge is power, sex is power,
and the world needs more of both.